They spent 15 years convincing me my grandmother didn't love me. They said she had forgotten me before she died, that I wasn't important enough to be mentioned in her will. So, I believed them. I stopped asking questions. I stopped wondering why every family gathering felt like I was an outsider. Until one ordinary afternoon, a retired lawyer knocked on my apartment door with a dusty envelope he had just discovered inside an old locked filing cabinet. Across the front, in my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words that changed my life forever. For Emma. Only after I'm gone. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a handwritten letter my family had hidden from me for 15 years. Because, if I had read it sooner, their biggest betrayal would have been exposed. And, after I finished reading the last sentence, I realized the people who called themselves my family hadn't just lied to me. They had stolen 15 years of my life. My name is Emma Parker, and for most of my life, I believed I was the problem. I grew up in a small town outside Boston, Massachusetts, where everyone knew the Parker family. To our neighbors, we looked close and successful. Inside our home, though, I always felt like a guest instead of a daughter. My parents loved my older brother, Ethan. His achievements were celebrated. His mistakes were forgiven. When I accomplished something, the room usually went quiet before someone changed the subject. The only person who ever made me feel truly seen was my grandmother, Margaret Parker. Every Saturday, she'd invite me to her little white cottage. We'd bake cinnamon cookies, work in her flower garden, and drink hot tea on the porch while she told me stories about our family. Before I left, she always hugged me tightly and whispered the same words. No matter what anyone says, never doubt how much you're loved. I never understood why she repeated that sentence every single week. When I turned 22, Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep. At the funeral, everyone cried, but something felt strange. Instead of talking about her, my parents and aunts kept whispering to each other. Every time I walked closer, the conversation stopped. A week later, my uncle announced that Grandma's estate had been settled. According to him, she hadn't left me anything. She loved you, he said with a forced smile, but there was nothing written for you. It hurt, but I accepted it. I had no idea that, at that very moment, a letter written in my grandmother's own hand was sitting inside a locked cabinet, waiting 15 years to tell me the truth. For years, I tried to move on. I built a life in Boston, found a stable job, and convinced myself that the past no longer mattered. My family and I spoke only on holidays, and even those conversations felt forced. Then, 15 years after my grandmother's funeral, everything changed. One rainy Tuesday evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. Standing outside was an elderly man in a gray suit, holding a worn leather briefcase. "Emma Parker?" he asked. When I nodded, he smiled sadly. "My name is Richard Lawson. I was your grandmother's attorney." I was confused. "My grandmother passed away 15 years ago." "I know," he replied. "And I've been looking for you ever since." He explained that after retiring, he had emptied an old storage room at his law office. Hidden behind a locked cabinet was a small wooden box with my grandmother's name on it. Inside was a sealed envelope. Across the front, in her handwriting, were the words, "For my granddaughter Emma, if you're reading this, someone kept my last wish from you." My hands began to shake. Richard looked at me and quietly said, "I don't believe this letter was forgotten, Emma. I believe it was hidden." The room suddenly felt silent. For 15 years, I had believed there was nothing left for me. But as I stared at the envelope in my hands, I realized someone in my own family had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure I never read what my grandmother wanted me to know. With a deep breath, I carefully broke the seal. The paper was old and slightly yellow, but my grandmother's handwriting was as familiar as ever. "My dearest Emma," it began, "if this letter reaches you years from now, it means someone I trusted betrayed my final wish." My heart started racing. "First, you must know this. I have loved you every single day of your life. Never believe anyone who tells you otherwise." Tears filled my eyes. Then I reached the next paragraph. "The reason our family treated you differently was never, because of you. It was because of a lie they chose to protect. I stopped breathing for a moment. The letter explained that when I was 10 years old, my father had secretly taken money from my grandmother's savings to save his failing business. He promised to repay every dollar. He never did. When Grandma confronted him, he begged her not to expose him. Instead, he convinced the rest of the family that I was the reason Grandma had become distant and difficult. Blaming me was easier than admitting the truth. Grandma refused to destroy her son's life publicly, but she never forgave what he had done. Before she died, she wrote everything down and asked her attorney to give me the letter after her funeral. Someone had made sure that never happened. At the bottom of the final page was one sentence that shattered everything I believed. Emma, the people who turned against you weren't protecting the family. They were protecting the person who betrayed it. I read the last sentence over and over. For 15 years, I had carried guilt that never belonged to me. I thought I had somehow failed my family. The truth was far more painful. They had sacrificed me to protect my father. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with the letter in my bag. When my father opened the door, his face turned pale the moment he saw the envelope. He recognized my grandmother's handwriting instantly. "Where did you get that?" he asked. I finally received what Grandma wanted me to read. He didn't deny it. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. Instead, he sat down, covered his face with his hands, and whispered, "I prayed that letter would never be found." A few minutes later, my mother walked into the room. She looked at the letter, then at my father. Without saying a word, tears filled her eyes. That silence told me everything. She had known the truth all along. Not only had my father betrayed my grandmother, my entire family had agreed to keep me in the dark. For 15 years. And at that moment, I realized the deepest betrayal wasn't the stolen money. It was that the people who were supposed to protect me had chosen to protect a lie instead. My father finally looked up at me. His voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted it to go this far. I couldn't stop myself from asking the question that had haunted me since childhood. Then why did everyone treat me like I didn't belong? He closed his eyes. Because once the lie started, we didn't know how to stop it. According to him, after Grandma confronted him about the missing money, he convinced the family that she had become unfair because she favored me over everyone else. Instead of admitting what he had done, they slowly distanced themselves from me. Year after year, the lie grew bigger. Family dinners, birthdays, Christmas, every cold look, every awkward silence, every moment I felt unwanted. It had all been built on one selfish decision. My mother reached for my hand. "Emma, I'm so sorry." I gently pulled my hand away. "I needed a mother when I was growing up," I said quietly. "An apology 15 years later can't give me those years back." The room fell silent. For the first time in my life, no one had an excuse left to hide behind. And as I walked toward the front door, I realized something my grandmother had tried to teach me all those years ago. Sometimes the hardest part isn't discovering the truth. It's accepting that the people who hurt you were the ones you trusted most. I left my parents' house without looking back. For the first time in years, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because it finally had a name. A week later, I visited my grandmother's grave with the letter in my hands. Fresh flowers covered the stone. I sat beside her for a long time, reading her words one last time. Then I noticed something folded inside the envelope that I had somehow missed. It was a small handwritten note. "Emma, if the truth ever reaches you, don't waste your life chasing revenge. Live the happy life they never allowed you to have. That will be your greatest victory." I smiled through my tears. For years, I thought my family had stolen my future, but they had only stolen my past. My future was still mine to build. I stood up, placed the letter beneath the flowers for a moment, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma, for never giving up on me." As I walked away, my phone rang. It was my father. I looked at the screen, then quietly pressed decline. Some betrayals deserve forgiveness. But forgiveness doesn't always mean giving people another chance. That day, I finally chose peace over pain. And for the first time in 15 years, I truly felt free. 6 months later, My life looked completely different. I had started smiling again. I bought a small house with a garden, just like my grandmother's. Every Sunday, I baked her cinnamon cookies and shared them with my neighbors. One afternoon, another letter arrived. This time it was from my father. He wrote that he had confessed everything to the entire family. Some relatives called to apologize. Others never did. I didn't need either. The truth had already given me something far more valuable than an apology. It gave me back my identity. For 15 years, I believed I wasn't enough. One hidden letter proved I had been loved all along. I folded my father's letter, placed it in a drawer, and kept only my grandmother's beside my favorite photograph of us. Because that was the only message I wanted to carry for the rest of my life. If you're listening to my story, and you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, remember this. Sometimes people don't reject you because you're unworthy. They reject you because your existence reminds them of a truth they don't want to face. And one day, the truth has a way of finding the light. Just like my grandmother's letter finally found me. The letter they hid for 15 years didn't just reveal my family's betrayal. It gave me my life back.